This video is part one of a two-part series on how to loom knit a rainbow baby blanket. It's made up of 6 panels, and this video will cover how to make the first panel. So you'll be learning today how to make panel A, which in my case is blue. Part 2 will be released shortly, and it will be about how to join panels using the loom rather than sewing them together. Make sure you've subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on this joining technique, which will be easy to understand. Thank you for watching Ms. Yarn. Today for part 1, we're going to cover number 1, how to mark your loom, number 2, how to cast on for panel A, number 3, how to do the garter stitch body, and number 4, how to do the purl bind off. As mentioned earlier, part 2 will be about joining new panels. For the supplies for the whole blanket, you will need a knitting loom. I used a 41 peg round loom with a gauge of 13/16 of an inch. Your loom doesn't necessarily need to be a round loom because we're making flat panels. And feel free to use a smaller gauge loom. Just make sure your yarn is appropriate. For example, the green loom you see now has a gauge of 5/8 of an inch. And the yarn in this swatch is a number 5 yarn called Charisma. So back to my extra large gauge loom, I used 6 balls of Wool Ease Thick and Quick, and I used the solid colors since they have more yarn than the variegated colors. And you'll also need a hook, a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and something to mark your loom. Let's start this rainbow blanket by marking our loom. I've marked the peg just left of the anchor peg as peg 13. I used paper and Scotch tape. Peg 13 will be like a waiting room peg once we start joining panels. I've marked the peg to the right of the anchor peg as peg 12. Then I counted the pegs toward the right so I could mark peg 1. These markers will help me since my panels are 12 stitches wide. We'll start the double E-wrap cast on by putting a slip knot on the anchor peg. Wrap peg 12 twice and knit over. So here we've casted on our first stitch. Let's move to peg 11. Wrap it twice back to front and knit over the bottom loop, just like you did with peg 12. Tighten it just a little bit and then move on to do a double E-wrap cast on all of the remaining pegs until you've cast it on onto peg 1. These 12 pegs will give us a panel that's just under 5.5 inches wide. Now we're at peg 1, so let's E-wrap it twice and knit over the bottom loop. And now our double E-wrap cast on is done. The garter stitch body is made by alternating purl rows and knit rows. So let's purl from peg 1 to peg 12. So row 1 is a purl row that we're working right to left. Since I'm right-handed, purling in this direction is easier for me. We're at peg 12 now, so let's do our last purl stitch for row 1. Now we've finished row 1. For row 2, we're going to do a knit row from left to right. Throughout this whole project, all knit stitches are E-wrap knit stitches. We're knitting on every single peg from peg 12 to peg 1. Now let's take the slip knot off of our anchor peg, and then we'll get back to knitting our row. Let's knit on peg 1, and now row 2 is complete. Continue this garter stitch body on your own. Keep doing this 2-row repeat until the panel is the length that you're looking for. I personally did 84 purl rows and 84 knit rows, so 168 rows altogether. Your last row should be a knit row. I'll see you in a moment and we'll do the bind off together. We have the length that we're looking for panel A, and now we're ready for the purl bind off. We'll call the pegs that we're working on peg 1 and peg 2, even as we move to the left. First, let's purl loosely on peg 1. And now we start the repeat. We purl on peg 2, and we move that loop to peg 1. It's a pretty big loop because we're purling quite loosely. Now let's knit over on peg 1, and we'll move the loop from peg 1 to peg 2. Now we have a new peg 1 and a new peg 2. So let's purl on peg 2, put the loop on peg 1, knit over, then move the loop from peg 1 to peg 2. We have a new peg 1 and a new peg 2. So let's purl on peg 2. Again, we're being quite loose. We put the loop on peg 1, we knit over, then we move the loop to peg 2. You can keep binding off on your own for the moment. Let's take a moment to look at our bind off edge so far, so we can see if we're being too loose or too tight. I think it looks pretty good. The tension is just right. So let's carry on with our purl bind off. I'm just making sure I have enough yarn available. And here I'm almost finished with the bind off. So let's purl on peg 12, move the loop to peg 11, knit over, and now let's find our scissors so we can cut off a generous tail. I'm going to pull on the loop to make it bigger. Now let's move the loom out of the way. If you want, you can pull on the loop until the working yarn comes out completely. Alternatively, you can do what I'm doing and put the yarn through the loop and then pull it tight to make a knot. And now our purl bind off is finished. Now you need to make the wrong side of the panel face you, thread your needle, and weave in your end. Let's go to the cast on edge, thread the needle, make the wrong side of the panel face you, and weave in this last end. Once you've taken care of your ends and you've cut off any excess yarn, then panel A is completely done. Join me in the next video called Part 2, and we'll learn how to join a new panel to an old panel directly on the loom. See you soon.